Displaced history is a work of speculative fiction. While it draws from real historical figures and events, all scenarios, conversations, and outcomes are fictional and intended for entertainment and thought-provoking exploration only.
This is Displaced History. Genius Displaced. History Rewritten. Episode 1, King of the Silk Road. It's dusk on the Silk Road. A caravan of traders presses on through swirling sand. Camels laden with silk and spices trudge forward as shadows lengthen across the dunes. Suddenly, the caravan halts. A group of armed riders blocks the path. At the front of the caravan is a figure unlike any this ancient world has seen before. A man who will soon control these trade routes through fear, deceit, and violence. This time on History Displaced, we delve into an astonishing what if. What if Pablo Escobar, the 20th century's most notorious drug lord, were transplanted into the ancient Silk Road era? We explore how one man's ruthless tactics could carve out a criminal empire across 4,000 miles of desert and mountains, in a world of camel caravans and imperial dynasties. To understand this alternate history, we first need to understand the Silk Road itself. Not a single road, but a vast network of routes stretching from ancient China, Central Asia, and the Middle East, all the way to Europe. From the Han Dynasty's opening of trade in 130 BCE to its decline in the 15th century, these routes carried silk, spices, jade, and much more between powerful empires. Here's historian Dr. Maria Ramirez.
The Silk Road was the global highway of its time. Unlike a highway, there was no single empire policing it end to end. Parts of the route fell beyond the reach of any emperor's law. Traders banded together in caravans for safety, stopping at roadside inns to rest, and for good reason. Bandits, thieves, and warlords were common along the route.
Silk Road scholar Dr. Wei Lu.
Merchants often had to pay tribute or unofficial tolls to local chieftains and brigands to ensure safe passage. This was a world where commerce and danger went hand in hand. Now imagine adding Pablo Escobar into that mix. He'd find an environment ripe for exploitation, huge amounts of money exchanging hands, fragmented authority, and people willing to pay for protection.
Pablo Escobar ruled the Medellín cartel in 1980s Colombia. He built a $30 billion fortune smuggling cocaine, at one point controlling up to 80% of the world's cocaine trade. His power came from a brutal mix of violence and corruption. Here's retired DEA agent Michael Sullivan.
I spent years on the Escobar case. The man could bribe or kill with equal ease. Pablo famously told officials, plata o plomo, silver or lead. You either took his money and cooperated, or you ended up with a bullet, no in between. I think about those Silk Road warlords. Escobar would have fit right in, or maybe he would have dominated them with ease. He was that ruthless.
Our story imagines Escobar appearing in Central Asia around the 7th or 8th century, the height of Silk Road trade. The Chinese Han and Tang dynasties dominate the East. The Persian Sassanid or early Islamic empires rule the West, and between them lie bustling oasis cities and nomadic khanates. In this volatile crossroads, a new patron rises.
If Escobar arrived then, he'd likely start on the fringes, perhaps in the Fergana Valley or the Tarim Basin, which is now southern Kyrgyzstan or western China. These were places where imperial influence waned and local bandits preyed on caravans. It's here a clever newcomer could make a name by offering what everyone needed: protection.
We can imagine the first legend of Pablo on the Silk Road, a ragtag caravan safehouse on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert. Local bandits plan to raid a merchant convoy that night, but Escobar gets there first.
They called him Baburu. He came out of nowhere. One night we're circled by bandits then. This stranger, his men ambushed them. He saved our goods, then demanded we pay him instead. Honestly, we were grateful it was him and not those cutthroats.
Escobar swiftly replaces the old bandit gang with his own men. He's learned the languages, the terrain, the power players. He spares a few of the original bandits, the ones who swear loyalty, and eliminates the rest. Word spreads in the caravans that a new warlord protector controls this stretch of the route. Pay his price, and you pass safely. Resist, and, well, nobody wants to find out.
This mirrors how Escobar operated in Colombia. He either co-opted rivals or wiped them out. Escobar on the Silk Road could unify disparate bandit groups under his leadership, essentially a cartel of bandits. In real history, when smaller smugglers wouldn't join him, he dealt with them. I suspect on the Silk Road, local bandit chiefs would face a quick choice: join Pablo's network and share in the riches, or be made an example of.
As months pass in our alternate timeline, Escobar is now dubbed the Blood Merchant by silently expanding his reach. He sends envoys along the trade routes. One group rides east toward the Chinese border, another west toward Persia. His goal? Establish a supply chain of illicit goods and a hierarchy of lieutenants across the Silk Road.
Historically, no single criminal ever controlled the entire Silk Road. It was just too vast. But Escobar was known for building distribution networks. He once managed a supply chain that smuggled up to 120 tons of cocaine every month in the 1980s. He might not have cocaine on the Silk Road, but he'd find other valuable commodities to smuggle.
Escobar could have trafficked opium from poppy fields in Bactria, which is now northern Afghanistan, to markets in China and beyond. Opium was known in antiquity, used medicinally across Persia and China. It wasn't a mass illicit drug then, but a man like Escobar could turn it into a black market gold mine. Salt, gems, even slaves were also traded along the Silk Road. If he cornered the slave trade between Central Asia and the Mediterranean, it would have been a horrific but effective source of power.
Escobar also sees opportunity in the legal trade. Silk Road merchants carry silk, tea, spices, porcelain, east to west, and bring back horses, glassware, and gold, west to east. Empires levy taxes at city gates and mountain passes. But an underworld route, greased by bribes, could dodge those tolls. Escobar begins running smuggling operations parallel to legitimate caravans.
I normally pay heavy duties to enter the city. That Pablo's men, they showed me a hidden path by the river gorge. We slipped past the tax collector at night. In return, I gave them a cut of my cirque profits gladly. They saved me a fortune in taxes.
This is key. Escobar could become the ultimate middleman. Many merchants would gladly deal with a smuggler if it meant higher profits for them. Corrupt officials might cooperate too for a share of the silver. In ancient times, corruption was endemic and communication was slow, perfect conditions for an organized smuggling ring. Escobar's network might span from the oasis of Kashgar, western China, through Samarkand, Uzbekistan, all the way to Persian cities like Merv or Ctesiphon, each segment run by his trusted captains.
He might even tap into the existing Sogdian merchant network, which historically connected Samarkand to China. The Sogdians were masters of Silk Road trade. Escobar could bribe or intimidate key Sogdian traders to work for him, effectively hijacking their centuries-old network. Records from 313 AD show Samarkandi merchants trading as far as China. Those are exactly the routes Pablo would infiltrate.
As his influence grows, Escobar employs the same playbook that served him in Colombia, adapted to this ancient world. He establishes a headquarters, perhaps, in a well-situated city like Samarkand, a wealthy crossroads of cultures. There, he lives in luxury behind fortress walls, just as he did at his Hacienda Napoli's estate. It's said he even keeps exotic animals in his compound, astonishing local nobles with a collection of rare beasts from along the Silk Road. In this alternative history, Escobar would infamously have a private zoo. Imagine a menagerie of Bactrian camels, Persian lions, maybe even an Indian elephant, all symbols of status to impress and intimidate.
He always had a flair for the dramatic. In Colombia, he built himself a lavish estate with hippos and dinosaurs statues. I can picture him doing it in Samarkand, throwing lavish feasts, inviting local chiefs, then making them indebted to him. Soft power on the surface backed by hard violence if they crossed him.
Escobar doesn't rely on goodwill alone. His enforcers, hardened warriors drawn from disbanded bandit crews or mercenaries from the steppe, patrol the routes and city streets. They become his sicarios of the Silk Road, carrying out swift punishment for betrayal. If a caravan dares defy his toll, its goods mysteriously vanish in the night. If a provincial governor tries to crack down on smuggling, he might be found poisoned or with a dagger in the back. Fear secures Pablo's reign.
The violence would be shocking to people of that era. Sure, warlords killed, but Escobar was essentially a narco-terrorist in our world, bombing commercial airliners, murdering judges and politicians. Transpose that to the Silk Road. He could, for example, slaughter an entire caravan as a message, or bribe a palace servant to assassinate a minister who spoke against him. It's a level of organized ruthlessness that most ancient states weren't prepared to face from a private actor.
One chilling possibility: Escobar might orchestrate something like the ancient world's version of a siege or terror attack. Perhaps, if a fortified city refused to cooperate, he'd find a way to undermine it. Maybe literally, by paying insiders to open the gates to his mercenaries. Remember, cities along the Silk Road often had rival factions and corruption. He could exploit that.
The rise of Escobar's Silk Road cartel doesn't go unnoticed by the great powers. We now imagine court officials in Chang'an, the capital of Tang, China, perplexed at reports that trade revenues are down and banditry is oddly organized. In the West, perhaps the Caliph in Baghdad or the Shah in Persia hears rumors of a lord of the road siphoning off wealth and intimidating border lords.
Your Majesty, the Western merchants complain that they must pay a heavy bribe to a pabulu. In the lands beyond our borders, our silk convoys face extortion. This cannot continue!
In ancient China, the state closely guarded the silk trade. It was illegal to export silkworms, for instance, to maintain their monopoly on silk production. Now, an outside force is muscling in. Similarly, in Persia, control of trade routes meant tax revenue and influence. Escobar threatens both.
Historically, when trade was threatened, big empires took action. The Han Dynasty fought nomadic tribes to secure the Silk Road. The Mongols, much later, brutally suppressed bandits during the Pax Mongolica, making the roads safe. We could expect the Tang Chinese or Persian authorities to try to eliminate Escobar. But here's the catch. He's slippery. He's not a king with a capital they can besiege. He's an underworld figure with networks and hideouts.
Escobar might respond as he did against the Colombian state, by going on the offensive. In our timeline, he bombed government buildings and even a civilian airliner to pressure authorities. In the Silk Road world, imagine he intercepts a diplomatic caravan or murders a high-ranking official sent to negotiate with him. Perhaps the Persian Shah's envoy goes to parley and winds up dead on the return journey, a warning to back off.
Back in the 90s, Pablo hit the Colombian government with a wave of terror when they tried to extradite him, cops killed, judges assassinated. If an emperor sent an army, I can see Pablo doing something drastic, bribing part of that army to turn on itself, or disappearing into the mountains and hitting their supply lines guerrilla style. He was essentially a guerrilla fighter with money. He'd wage a shadow war.
Now the powers try a different tack: diplomacy. In this alternative history, Perhaps the Chinese and Persians, who seldom allied, find common ground in dealing with Escobar. One could imagine a joint effort, a rare East-West accord, to squeeze out the cartel. Or individually, they might try to buy Escobar off with titles and responsibilities.
Frankly, if we cannot defeat him, perhaps we should come to terms. Offer the rogue a governorship in our frontier in exchange for loyalty. Better to have him inside our tent than outside, causing chaos.
It's plausible. In some cases, emperors would grant amnesty or official posts to troublesome warlords to bring them into the fold. Escobar might accept a nominal title, say, Protector of the Western Marches, if it meant stability and continued profit. But he'd never truly bend the knee. He'd use the recognition to his advantage, all while continuing his operations in secret.
On the other hand, imagine Escobar's ego. In our timeline, he briefly became a politician, got himself elected to the Colombian Congress, but he never intended to play second fiddle for long. He might betray any deal once he's regrouped. Perhaps he feigns loyalty, only to eliminate the imperial garrisons once the pressure eases.
Diplomacy might also involve divide and conquer. The Tang court could reach out to local Turkic khans who resent Escobar's dominance, arming them to rebel against him. Or the Persians could sway some of his lieutenants with richer bribes. After all, Plata can cut both ways. The shadowy empire Pablo built starts to face internal strain.
I see parallels to how Escobar's cartel eventually fell apart. Internal betrayals, rivals rising. He trusted very few. In an ancient setting, communication is slow. One of his regional bosses might decide to go rogue or surrender to an emperor for a reward. Once cracks form, the big empires would press the advantage.
For a time, let's say Escobar achieves the unthinkable, a criminal Pax Romana of the Silk Road under his shadow rule. Travel actually becomes safer in the areas he controls because he ruthlessly exterminates small bandit gangs. Caravans start to prefer routes under Escobar's protection despite the extortionate fees, because it's still safer than braving unprotected paths. The Silk Road, oddly enough, prospers in this controlled chaos.
This is ironic, but not unprecedented. In history, when strongmen control territory, they often enforce order to maximize profits. You might call it the Escobarian Accord. Of course, it's peace at gunpoint, or rather, at sword point. Merchants can move freely as long as they pay up. Cities flourish because trade continued to happen even if a mob boss is taking a cut of everything.
Over years, this could dramatically alter the Silk Road's development. Perhaps technological and cultural exchange accelerates because travel is safer. But the cost is that one man siphons obscene wealth and influences politics across continents. He could become a kingmaker, installing puppet local rulers who owe him, undermining those he can't bribe. Essentially an empire within empires.
Eventually, though, every empire meets its decline. Maybe it's an imperial coalition army that finally corners Escobar's forces in a mountain stronghold after a decade of cat-and-mouse. Or perhaps Escobar grows older and more paranoid, and one of his own top lieutenants, perhaps a trusted enforcer from his Medellín days now aging in this new world, turns on him for a last big payout. Picture the end, a fierce battle in the Pamir Mountains. Escobar's loyal fighters, vastly outnumbered by a rare alliance of Chinese, Persian, and steppe warriors, make a last stand. True to form, Pablo purportedly offers a chest of silver to any enemy general willing to switch sides plata o plomo to the very end. But this time, the lead wins. The reign of the cartel king is over when an arrow or perhaps a well-placed spear strikes him down.
You know, in reality, Escobar died on a rooftop in Medellín, gun in hand, trying to escape the law. I imagine if he fell on the Silk Road, it'd be similarly in a blaze of defiance, not in chains. The man didn't go quietly.
So, what's the legacy of Pablo Escobar's mythical Silk Road empire? Let's step back into our world and assess the long-term global impact of this alternate timeline.
For one, the idea of a criminal syndicate spanning continents would enter history much earlier. Future generations in that world might speak of Escobar alongside emperors a cautionary tale of how a common outlaw became as powerful as kings. It could inspire others, maybe later warlords or even the Mongols, take a page from his playbook on integrating the underworld with governance.
Economically, the Silk Road might have seen periods of great efficiency under his shadow role, followed by crashes. When Escobar fell, there'd be a power vacuum. Trade could be severely disrupted as factions fight over his remnants. Perhaps this hastens the shift to maritime trade. Historically, by the 15th century, the Silk Road waned as sea routes took over. In this alternate world, if an unstable criminal empire made the land route too unpredictable, China and Europe might invest in naval exploration even sooner to avoid reliance on the overland route.
And culturally, think of the mingling. Escobar employing soldiers from everywhere, dealing with Chinese mandarins one day and Persian courtiers the next. He'd have a melting pot of criminal and merchant culture. Perhaps even earlier fusion of East-West ideas as a side effect. Strange to say, but his evil might inadvertently bring people together in new ways, like how he inadvertently funded infrastructure in Colombia. He built housing for the poor with drug money. Here, maybe he funds caravanserais, fortifies certain towns as part of his operations, and those become lasting centers of trade.
In the end, our journey is speculative, yet illuminating. The Silk Road was a realm of possibilities for good and ill. Pablo Escobar, transplanted to that era, shows us how the traits of a criminal kingpin might play out in a world of silk and saddles instead of cocaine and cars. It's a collision of two histories. The narcotics empire meets the ancient trade empire. And the results are as fascinating as they are terrifying. You've been listening to Displaced History. This episode was The King of Silk Road, an immersive exploration of alternate history. Special thanks to our guests, Dr. Eleanor Ramirez, Dr. Y. Liu, and Agent Michael Sullivan, for guiding us through this tapestry of fact and fiction. Join us next time as we unravel another historical what-if.